Ever wondered what Amish life looks like when tour buses leave? Tourists see peaceful farms, handmade quilts, and horse-drawn buggies. They don't see the exhausting labor, modern complications, and daily struggles behind the postcard image. These 10 facts reveal the reality tourists never witness during their carefully curated visits. Daily technology. The no electricity rule tourists learn about during visits tells only part of the story. In reality, most Amish workshops and businesses utilize extensive modern technology through creative interpretations of ordnung restrictions that maintain technical rule compliance while embracing practical modernization. Smartphones hide in workshop drawers and barn offices, used for business communication with suppliers and customers who expect instant response times. Internet connections run computers in separate office buildings acceptable because the internet isn't in the home where it might corrupt family life. Email, online ordering, and digital record keeping happen daily in businesses that tourists assume operate entirely by hand. Pneumatic tools powered by diesel air compressors fill workshops producing the handmade furniture tourists purchase. The technicality is that pneumatic power doesn't violate electricity restrictions, only grid electricity is forbidden, not compressed air or hydraulic power. This loophole allows Amish manufacturers to compete with industrial operations while maintaining the plain identity. Battery-powered equipment proliferates in homes and workshops, cordless drills, flashlights, fans, even battery-operated blenders and mixers. Solar panels charge these batteries, creating electricity without connecting to the public grid. The rules adapt to economic necessity while preserving the appearance of technology rejection that defines Amish identity to outsiders fascinated by their supposed simplicity. Monday morning. Tourist visits happen Tuesday through Saturday when households have recovered from the weekly ordeal that Monday represents washing day for families of 8 to 10 people, generating massive laundry volumes that require hours of exhausting manual labor. The chaos begins at 5 a.m. when mothers start heating water on wood cookstoves, filling multiple wash tubs for the day ahead. By 6 a.m., children are sorted into work teams, older daughters helping wash, younger children carrying water, boys hauling wet laundry to drying areas. The peaceful family cooperation tourists imagine becomes shouted instructions over running water, crying toddlers underfoot, and teenagers complaining about the unending work. The washing itself is physically brutal. Even with gas-powered wringer washers that many communities now permit, someone must feed each item through the wringer, sort loads, manage water temperature, and handle the soaking wet weight of sheets, towels, and clothing for large families. Hands become raw from constant wetness and lye soap. Backs ache from bending over tubs. The work continues for 6 to 8 hours straight. Weather adds another stress layer. Rain means no outdoor line drying, requiring indoor racks throughout the house, creating humidity and taking days to dry. Wind tears items from lines. Cold weather freezes clothing stiff on lines, requiring thawing before bringing inside. The simple task of washing becomes an elaborate logistical operation, consuming the entire day every single week. This is not the peaceful, simple life tourists photograph on Tuesday afternoons when clean laundry has been folded away and mothers have recovered enough to smile. Women's workload. Female tourists often romanticize Amish women's lives, imagining peaceful days of baking bread and tending gardens while children play contentedly nearby. The actual experience involves relentless physical labor from before dawn until late evening that would exhaust most modern women within days. A typical day begins at 4:30 a.m. with wood stove lighting and breakfast preparation for 8 to 10 people. Morning hours bring animal care, chickens fed, eggs collected, cows milked, livestock tended, followed by kitchen cleanup and laundry sorting. Mid-morning involves bread baking or food preservation depending on the season. Lunch preparation for the family and any workers begins at 10:30 a.m., followed by more cleanup. Afternoons bring garden work during growing season, weeding, harvesting, processing, produce, or sewing, mending, and quilting during winter. Dinner preparation starts at 3 p.m. for the main meal served when men return from fields or workshops. Evening cleanup, children's bedtime routines, and final preparations for the next day extend until 9 p.m. or later. This schedule continues 7 days a week with only slight Sunday modification. There are no days off, no hired help for most families, and no labor-saving devices reducing the physical demands. Women develop chronic back pain, joint problems, and early aging from the constant manual labor that simple living requires. The exhaustion is real and constant. Many Amish women exist in a state of permanent fatigue that they cannot admit without seeming ungrateful for their blessings or questioning God's plan for women. The smiling mothers tourists photograph are often holding themselves together through sheer will, counting hours until they can collapse into bed before starting again before dawn. Community conflicts. The unified, peaceful Amish communities that tourists observe during brief visits conceal significant internal conflicts that occasionally explode into church splits, family divisions, and neighbor tensions that challenge the harmonious image central to Amish appeal. Theological disputes over rule interpretations create bitter divisions. Should solar panels be allowed, or do they represent worldly dependence on technology? Can businesses use computers, or does this violate simplicity? Should youth have more supervised rumspringa, or does stricter control push more to leave? These questions don't have clear biblical answers, leading to competing interpretations that split communities when bishops cannot reach agreement. Progressive factions wanting more accommodation, with modern necessities clash with conservative members viewing any change as slippery slope to worldliness. When disagreements become irreconcilable, entire families switch to different church districts or move to more compatible settlements, creating family separations and community disruptions tourists never witness. Property disputes, business competition, and personal grievances create neighbor tensions that persist for years because the close-knit nature of Amish communities means you cannot escape people you're in conflict with. You see them weekly at church, pass their farms daily, and must cooperate in community work despite personal animosity. Shunning represents the most visible conflict, occurring when members violate church rules seriously enough to warrant excommunication. The resulting family devastation, parents unable to eat with children, siblings refusing to speak, tears at relationships in ways that contradict the family values. Tourists define Amish life, limited health care. The Amish relationship with modern medicine creates health consequences tourists don't observe during visits to communities that appear healthy and robust, but actually suffer from delayed treatment, untreated conditions, and genetic disorders resulting from healthcare limitations. Cost concerns delay treatment for serious conditions. Families wait to see if problems resolve themselves before incurring medical expenses, sometimes allowing treatable conditions to worsen into life-threatening situations. Pain is endured, symptoms are ignored, and warning signs are dismissed as long as possible, because medical care represents financial catastrophe for families without insurance. Mental health receives particularly inadequate attention. Depression, anxiety, trauma, and other psychological conditions carry heavy stigma in communities that value emotional stoicism and attribute mental struggles to spiritual weakness. Most Amish suffering mental health crises receive only prayer and bishop counseling rather than professional psychiatric care, leaving conditions untreated that could be managed with therapy or medication. Genetic disorders occur at elevated rates in Amish populations because marrying within small gene pools concentrates recessive genetic conditions. Dwarfism, metabolic disorders, and developmental disabilities appear more frequently than in general populations. While some communities now utilize genetic counseling to identify carriers of dangerous recessive genes, many still view genetic problems as God's will rather than preventable medical issues. Children with special needs often lack appropriate educational services and therapies that could improve their function and quality of life, instead remaining at home with mothers already overwhelmed by other responsibilities. Education trade-offs. Tourist presentations of Amish education emphasize traditional values, practical skills, and character formation while glossing over the significant limitations that 8th grade completion imposes on individuals navigating an increasingly complex modern world that requires literacy, analytical thinking, and specialized knowledge. The most obvious cost is limited career opportunities. Young people with mechanical aptitude, artistic talent, or intellectual curiosity find their potential constrained by education ending before high school when most specialized learning begins. Bright children who might have thrived in higher education instead become farmers or tradespeople, not because they chose these paths, but because limited education offered no alternatives. Difficulty navigating modern systems creates practical problems. Understanding legal contracts, medical consent forms, insurance policies, or tax documents requires literacy and analytical skills beyond what elementary education provides. Most Amish must rely on lawyers, accountants, or community members with more education to handle these matters, creating dependence that limits autonomy. The intellectual frustration affects individuals aware that their questions remain unanswered because they lack the education to research and understand complex topics. Curiosity about science, history, philosophy, or other fields goes unsatisfied because accessing this knowledge requires educational foundations they were denied. Young people increasingly recognize what they're missing as interaction with outside world grows through business contacts and tourist encounters. The resentment some feel about education limitations complicates their decisions about remaining Amish versus leaving for opportunities education would provide. Domestic work. The self-sufficiency that impresses tourists visiting Amish farms comes at the cost of exhausting daily labor that occupies every family member from before dawn until after dark in work that never appears on the carefully curated tours showing only picturesque activities like quilting or baking. Food preservation during harvest season consumes entire days repeatedly throughout summer and fall. Tomato canning might require 8-hour days for a week, processing hundreds of pounds of tomatoes into jars for winter use. Green beans, corn, peaches, applesauce, pickles, jellies, and meats all require similar time-intensive preservation, creating the food security tourists admire but never witness being produced. Garden maintenance from spring planting through fall harvest requires daily attention, weeding, watering, pest control, harvesting, replanting for gardens sized to feed families of 10 for an entire year. The labor involved is substantial and unrelenting because neglecting the garden even briefly results in weed takeover or crop loss. Animal care happens regardless of weather, illness, or fatigue. Cows require milking twice daily every single day. Chickens need feeding and egg collecting morning and evening. Livestock demand water, feeding, shelter, maintenance, and health monitoring. The responsibility never pauses and cannot be delayed because animals depend completely on their caretakers for survival. The exhausting reality of self-sufficiency contradicts the romantic, simple life image that attracts tourists who have never experienced the unending physical labor that food and basic supplies require without modern conveniences. Winter isolation hardships. The picturesque snow-covered Amish farms tourists see on calendars and postcards represent a harsh seasonal reality tourists who visit predominantly during pleasant weather rarely experience directly. The cold, isolation, and physical hardship that winter brings to communities without central heating, motorized transportation, or easy access to outside world. Wood heat provides the only warmth in most Amish homes, requiring constant tending throughout the day and night during deep winter. Fires go out overnight, leaving homes frigid by morning until stoves are relit and heat gradually returns, a process taking hours. Drafty old houses lose heat quickly, leaving rooms farthest from stoves uncomfortably cold despite fires burning constantly. Families huddle near stoves in living areas because bedrooms remain nearly freezing. Buggy travel becomes dangerous and miserable in snow, ice, and sub-zero temperatures. Trips to town that seem charming during summer become ordeals in winter as families bundle against wind in unheated buggies, traveling slowly on icy roads with limited visibility. Many stay home as much as possible during harsh weather, creating social isolation that can last weeks. The darkness of winter months compounds isolation. Short daylight hours and limited artificial lighting mean evening activities happen in dim lamplight, restricting work and creating psychological impacts from seasonal darkness. Depression rates climb during winter months, particularly among women confined to homes with small children. Tourists see carefully curated moments, handwork displayed in shops, farmers waving from fields on sunny days, children playing in yards, families traveling in buggies. They don't see the 4:30 a.m. wake-ups, the physical exhaustion, the financial stress, the family conflicts, the rebellious youth, the inadequate health care, the intellectual frustrations, the domestic violence victims, the grueling household labor, or the seasonal hardships that define actual daily experience for people living this life. This doesn't mean Amish life is entirely miserable or that tourists are entirely deceived. Many Amish genuinely appreciate aspects of their lifestyle, family closeness, religious conviction, slower pace, community support, meaningful work. But honest appreciation requires seeing both the benefits and the costs, rather than romanticizing a lifestyle we observe only superficially during vacation visits.